How many of you are undergraduates? Great. How many are doing master's programs? Okay, excellent. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about my career and a little bit about the potential of a career in the environment. This month, coming up in Rio in Brazil, is going to be a meeting of governments and farmers. I see, I'm getting feedback. Indigenous people, women's groups, NGOs, very diverse lot of people, thousands and thousands of people are going to gather there to discuss sustainable development. And this is 20 years after the first meeting on sustainable development in 1992 in Rio, which is where I started my international career virtually with IUCN, and I went to that meeting as part of their delegation. I'm going again, this time 20 years later, as a volunteer to IUCN as part of its delegation again. So having worked internationally, I've sort of maintained links with that international organisation and contribute to its work. So it's very important that you try to get engaged in something that's outside of your work. So you're building all sorts of skills in the community, and you bring those things, as the previous speaker mentioned to you, into your own career. So in Rio, the green economy is the main topic. How do we refix or rejig our economy to become greener and more concerned about the environment? How do we move to restore our earth and make jobs in that area? How do we move our energy systems? How do we really put green into everybody's job, actually? So the green economy, food, water, oceans, energy, cities and disasters are the issues that are going to happen or be discussed in Rio. Now, as well as governments coming there and international organisations and businesses, as you can see down the bottom here, there's actually a corporate sustainability meeting with thousands of businesses also talking. So this is a global conversation and it's a learning opportunity. Recently, KPMG, and we have a speaker from KPMG, so I'm stealing a bit of her thunder, brought out a report saying, expect the unexpected. And you heard about change from the previous speaker. Our whole careers have been in an enormous theatre of change. Change in the way we work from the internet, change in the sort of way our jobs have shaped, but change is what's going to be happening to us externally. And KPMG lists these 10 things to say every business has to think about these 10 things that are going to be impacting on them in the future. And that's the same whether you're in an NGO or a government. You have to think about how you're going to create value, how you're going to create your business opportunities out of these things that are going to be knocking on the external environment. And it's not that you're dealing with these 10 things all as separate. They're all influencing each other. So something like wealth is going to be influenced by climate, for example, as climate impacts on our economies, on our cities, and so forth, or on our food production. Or if we're trying to make other forms of energy and we start making biofuels, that will affect food and that will affect our water. So everything's interconnected to everything else. So what KMG is saying to businesses is, boy, you've got to look at these trends and think about how you're managing for the future. And so what this is really saying is that your brilliant career will have to take account of sustainability. It's going to be mainstream as part of everybody's life, no matter what they're going to be doing in the future. Whether it's the way we design buildings, the way we produce energy, the way we work with each other in cooperative partnership types of arrangements. Well, coming to academic careers, which I came to Macquarie in 2005, having worked 14 years internationally with IUCN from a headquarters in Switzerland. And that international organisation started in 1948, and it was set up to be a forum for governments and non-government organisations to work for the conservation of nature. Actually, the preservation of nature, it was called in the beginning. But this organisation was often a leader in thinking. It came out with the first definition of sustainable development in 1980. And when I joined in 1991, it had just produced a new strategy for caring for the earth, just before the 1992 summit that the UN held on sustainable development. So when I returned from Switzerland in 2005, I came to work at Macquarie University, because I thought I had a lot to offer in terms of teaching people in the future about this world of sustainable development. So in academic fields, there are great jobs. It's a really great place to work, a university, just as I found all of my places I've worked in my life really, really wonderful. And I think it's something about the people that are attracted to the environment and sustainability field that make it so. So some of my colleagues work particularly in the wildlife management and marine science area. And, you know, part of their research work is to go to Antarctica or to go to Macquarie Island and study seals, or they're up at Port Stephens having a look at the dolphins and trying to work out if there are different populations of these creatures and how they're feeding and how they're going and whether visitor boats are disturbing whales and so on. So the research can be in a sort of extraordinary range of areas, and then you combine this, of course, to teach and bring that research knowledge into teaching. As well as that, I have colleagues who are working as academics in the environmental science area. And so these are both pathways to develop your own career or their areas of work in society. These environmental science, they're monitoring, for example, the air that comes out of our coal-fired power stations and measuring what mercury is coming out of that coal and recording that, and then taking that advice into the international setting with the United Nations Environment Programme and advising them about setting up a new agreement, international agreement, about how to manage mercury in the environment. So environmental science is a very important underpinning for understanding our air pollution and climate modelling and so forth. And then there's environmental planning, where we're deciding how do we best use our natural resources in order to meet our needs in terms of habitation, cities, transport, and how we look after that environment in which we're living and the wonderful diversity of life. So where do we put our buildings in relation to our coasts? What are we going to do in the future as sea levels rise and we get more storms and we have more inundation of the sea onto our coastal areas? What are the planning things we need to put into place now, and how are we going to adapt to that climate change in the future? These are all things that people are thinking about now and starting to work on in planning. And as well, I have colleagues who work in environmental management, which is working with communities about how do we decide the best way of using natural resources and of monitoring and assessing the, say for here, a lake, and looking at the ash deposits from the coal-fired power station. So there are many dimensions of the environmental work which provide very important foundations for understanding how our world works and managing it. So now I work to bring the sort of knowledge I gained in working internationally in sustainable development to a program called the Master of Sustainable Development. And that's a one-year degree which is offered for people who've had experience in their past, in their life, so that you're adding on to an experience of working in organisations and so forth. So there's a teaching component in an academic job. That's usually about 40%. I tend to take a higher load and do 60% teaching, and then there's a 40% usually in research. And I do a smaller component, and I've been working, for example, with some of the local councils on a greenway project, and looking at the governance. How do we involve the community? How do you manage a resource together between council and a community process? And as well as that, working on a research project in Macquarie University about how do we put sustainability into more of the curriculum within the university. As well as that, universities give you about a day a week to do service, both within the university but also within the community. And so my contribution there is to work with IUCN, but I'll come back to that towards the end. So you can come at this work from many interdisciplinary pathways. You heard about the importance of communication and marketing in national parks. But you can come at it from business and business management and add in environment or sustainability to your business training, because that's becoming an integral part of business now. Or you can come through economics or accounting or law. There are so many disciplines that are so important in thinking about the decisions that we want to make for the environment and for our future, that any undergraduate degree is a fine foundation to go on and, say, do a master in an environmental field. Because we're talking about governance. How do we organise ourselves together? How do we organise participation? How do we get stakeholders working together to come up with good decisions? Right through to philosophy. How do we understand our values, our ethics, and so forth? So pathways to an academic career is a bachelor degree, 3 years usually, a master in research, which Macquarie is bringing in next year, which is a 2-year degree, and then a PhD. That's if you want an academic career. You really need a PhD as sort of a baseline. And I'm probably one of the unusual members of staff who hasn't got a PhD, but came in through a very strong, you might say, practice experience. So you might say I'm a pracademic rather than an academic. Another key skill is a postgraduate certificate in higher education, because teaching and helping people to learn is also a skill. So I would say they were fairly essential formal qualifications if you're going to go for an academic career. If you have a bachelor's degree in any field, as I was saying, and you wanted to move into environment and sustainability, then you could choose to do a master's degree in one of the environment or sustainability fields. And I say about 50 to 60% of our students have actually moved from a career in something else, and they recognise that if you're going to be in the future, you have to get into some environmental and sustainability capability. And so what they're doing is a coursework master, which are around a year and a half. And you can specialise there from next year. We're going to just a Master of Environment with specialisations. So you could do environmental management or planning or studies or education and so forth, and come out with a degree that moves your undergraduate degree in a new sort of direction. What I'd recommend is that if you're trying to get a job, having done that sort of career switch, or having maybe done an undergraduate and then a postgraduate degree, is to try within your course to do work practice units, so that you actually get out into the workplace and have an experience and professionally reflect on it. That you try to get internships, you try and work through your holiday periods and get jobs in all sorts of different places and build up your experience. Because it's that work practice experience is what the employer is looking for. The other thing is to try to go on volunteer type programs like Earthwatch or International Student Volunteers, for example, where you can gain experience of other countries, or you can stay in Australia and gain experience of practice. The other thing to try and think about is perhaps having an OH&S, Occupational Health and Safety Certificate, because that very much gets blended into a lot of environment work. You can take those sort of programs at TAFE and build some of those more technical skills to go with your postgraduate study. Or look into quality auditing, like ISO types of standards and so on, which are sort of working with companies to become sort of compliant with environmental legislation. So try also to join volunteer groups, so you're gaining experience in working with community, social skills, relational skills. They're the things that are going to make you successful in your job, so that you're getting a good idea of how society works. And as was mentioned at the beginning, there are many, many dimensions of the work, from local government, state government, although it's starting to chop back the jobs. So we need a bit of pressure on our Premier to say, hey, this is a really important area that you shouldn't be chopping at the present time. But there's federal government, there's the research areas like CSIRO, like private, even research companies that are setting up to explore new energy systems and so on. You have the international organisations, which after you gain experience, like United Nations Environment Programme, United Nations Development Programme, the World Bank, World Monetary Organization. All of these operating around the world provide exciting jobs. And non-government organizations, which are working very much on community education, advocacy, and so on. Also, or even with a law twist like Environmental Defender's Office. Consultancies is another big area of work. And as the state government cuts back its positions, then the consultancy work will increase because they won't have the capacity in the government to do the work. So it's a win-win, I suppose you might say, but just where you work would vary. And again, business. A lot of companies are becoming very sustainable, and some of the ones that are out there in front, like Lend-Lease, like Westpac, Fuji Xerox, and so on, you'll be hearing more of afterwards. Energy, mining, industry, agribusiness, all huge areas that are going to grow in importance. So I suppose some tips from me. Learning on the job is a really big factor. How do you learn on the job? You find a mentor who looks after you somewhat, that you can talk things over with, who can give you guidance, be prepared to listen, be prepared to learn. Another big factor that we had in our IUCN work was to do professional reflection after everything we did. So we'd sit down and say what went well, why did it go well, what could we do better next time, how would we do that next time, and you sort of keep notes so that you're learning and growing in your profession. I think the key skills that you need, even though I started out as an educator, worked in a National Parks and Wildlife Service, for example, as an educator, worked in museums as an educator, that was solid, that was experience. But when I got into international work, what I needed was relationship management, network management, facilitation, strategic planning, being able to define clear outcomes, being able to write project proposals, be able to fundraise, be able to report on my projects, and also to be able to go and advocate for my work, as well as a very, very high degree of intercultural communication. So that's a bit of reflection on the career, but try to connect yourself into volunteer networks. IUCN, for example, has networks in environmental law, in economic policy, in education communication, in protected areas and so on, and all of them are encouraging young people to join. So if you can join those networks, you're in a learning environment, you get to join in the activities that happen internationally, and that starts to build your skills. While I've been at Macquarie as a volunteer for the IUCN's Commission on Education, I worked on a document which is a guide for governments about how to manage communication with their biodiversity plans. I've been to New Zealand and run training and capacity development programs with them, and that's a sort of extra add-on that you get, and you work with very exciting people. Okay, thank you.